Welcome to Victorious Living with your host, Pastor Tia C, where we grow by grace, rest in faith, and do all things through Christ. I have a wonderful topic today. We're going to explore another nugget of grace in personal boundaries. Personal boundaries. Tag a friend. Let's talk. So, I'm always excited about the show, and I never want to bring you all empty things. I want to talk about stuff that would be worth your time because I really value the fact that you take the time to tune in. Some of you have set your alarms to make sure you view the show. Others of you have been telling friends and family, tune into this show. I had the pleasure last weekend. I was at a wonderful event, and a lady and I kept looking at each other like, you look so familiar. And finally, she said to me, I know you. I know you from the radio program. And so I appreciate that, and I thank you all for tuning in. And so I like bringing topics that I would want to listen to myself, right? And I was just thinking about, like, God, what would we talk about this week? And the word boundaries came to me. And so it's like, yeah, boundaries. Several years ago, I read the book Boundaries, and someone asked me to do a training in Ocean City. And so I did it, and it went over so well, a partner and myself. And people were saying, sometimes you don't think about the fact that you have got to set boundaries. Maybe you just don't think of that language, boundaries. But that's what we need. Every human life needs it. And so we're going to define it as usual. We're going to talk about some components of it. We're going to talk about even how you can set some boundaries, right? Maybe you've never thought about it, or maybe you say, I thought about it, I just don't know how to approach it. So let's address those things on tonight. First of all, personal boundaries, by definition, and this is someone else's definition, it is guidelines that a person creates to identify for themselves acceptable ways for other people to behave towards them. You get that? I'm going to read it again. Personal boundaries are guidelines that a person creates to identify for themselves acceptable ways for other people to behave toward them. That is so loaded. My goodness, it is loaded. If you go back and look at this video, this is one of those things you would want to write down and periodically just reassess. Like, am I creating these boundaries? Am I setting up these ways to identify what's acceptable for me, or how people can react with me, and in turn, how I react with, or how I interact with people? It's your own vision, if you will, of what you deem acceptable interaction. No one can define that for you. Right? We may have high expectation and high hopes, and we want to set the standards here, but if you can't live up to those standards, then it won't work out for you. Or maybe I think more highly of you than you think of yourself. We've all met people like that, when you're like, oh my goodness, they don't understand their value, and so they don't set appropriate boundaries. But it's what you deem to be acceptable interaction. It's not a checklist that you impose on people, like, in order for you to talk to me. No, it's not ridiculous like that. Nor is it for you to impose on people by saying, this is my standard and it ought to be yours too. You can't tell me what my boundary can be, because you don't know what powers me, what fuels me. And so it's that personal creation of limitations, of rules, of guidelines that you set. It's you identifying what's acceptable. And I think that word kept jumping out to me, for you to identify. And that's why I say it's not a checklist that you tell somebody else, but it's almost like an internal registry that when it's happening, you're like, yeah, this is desirable, this is appropriate, this is acceptable. But when it's being violated, your internal alarms go off and say, oh, no. Oh no, this is unacceptable, will not be tolerated, will not allow this in my life. And so it's your registry that takes place, right? So boundaries can be based on several things. It can be based on family values. Depending on the family you come from, the traditions that you set, the gender roles that you identify with, you can set your values or your boundaries around those values. Like, I particularly like, and somebody may say it's old school, but I particularly like when a man opens a door for a woman. Well, why do I like that? Because my grandfather did it. Well, why do I like that? Because my father did it all my life, right? And so that's a value and that's a boundary for me. And so when suppose I were single and I'm dating and a guy just be like, fend for yourself, yo, whatever. All type of alarms will go off for me. This is not acceptable because based on my family values, this is not flowing right. But then we would have to maybe have a conversation about it to see what is it that, or maybe I would need to be more observant to see like the women in his family, how do the men treat them? Do they let the door just bust in their face? Do they open the car doors they're walking by? Do they show any protective tendencies, right? So I would set that boundary as would you based on some of my family values. We also set boundaries based on religious faith. Who is God? What role does he play in the human life? What type of respect do you think he's worthy of? And so you might set boundaries because God is everything. And so I govern my life by his word. And anything that violates his word violates me. And so my boundary is, up to his word. But if you go outside of his word or you disregard his word, then that violates me. And so you can set boundaries based on your religious faith and who you deem God, the importance and the value that you assign or ascribe to God. You can also set boundaries based on cultural norms. Now, that's a big thing because I've had the privilege to go to almost 30 countries around the world, and I got to tell you that every country is not the same. There are major things that are just alike no matter where you go on planet Earth. It's just common to humanity, right? But then there are other little nuances that are not common to humanity. It has everything to do with a culture. And so when you think about the fact that we are American, or maybe someone is not Native American, right? Maybe they hail from somewhere else and now they're here and they're blending or they're merging, or maybe they're bringing where they came from with them. All that helps to set your boundary. So I may set a boundary as an American because that's valued in this country, in this culture, in the way we have been taught, in the way our society talks about things. And someone from somewhere else is like, oh, okay, if that's important to you, right? Same can be with me. Like, I would have never deemed that to be important, but once you explain to me culturally, I get it. That's a cultural norm that you value, and so you set boundaries around that value. Another one could be prior experiences, and I gotta let you know that everything you experience influences your future decisions. When you have a great experience, you walk away smelling roses and seeing butterflies, and it causes you to react one way. But if you have a bitter experience, a violent experience, a saddening experience, it too influences how you filter anything that comes through that. And so you may set boundaries. Like suppose you grew up in a home where there's a lot of love and a lot of nurture. You may set a boundary that says, no, you are not going to disregard me and intimidate me and make me feel this way because of my experience. I had a good experience. Or someone else may say, I grew up in a bunch of violence and a bunch of abuse or a bunch of deceit or something. And so they set boundaries because they're like, I can see it a mile away and I don't want to live in this foolishness anymore, right? So our past experiences influence our future decisions, which help us to determine some of our boundaries. Boundaries are in different areas too. So boundaries can be in the area verbal, they can be physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, psychological, right? And on and on and on. But I just want to break down those right there. When you think of boundaries, verbal boundaries, it can dictate the words that you're willing to use or allow to be used toward you. All right? So some of us have boundaries that say, don't call me out my name. Other people, that's not a boundary for them. I remember a lady one time told my mother, I think, mentioned something to the effect of, I don't like being called out of my name. I don't accept that in my life. And the lady said, oh, that doesn't faze me. We grew up being called some of everything, right? So for her, it didn't even offend her. It was the normal tone or the normal use of language for her to be called outside of her name. And so you have to, again, based on your family values, your past experiences or whatever that dictates to you, your faith or other things, you can make some boundaries around words, which means you may not talk to people in a certain way. And they say, oh, it doesn't bother me. Okay, it doesn't bother you, but that's a boundary for me. I don't talk to people like that, right? So you can set up verbal boundaries, not only the words, but the tone. Some people are very sarcastic. It's just the culture. Others have a boundary that says, I don't entertain sarcasm. So when I meet people and I find out that their tone is sarcastic, I distance myself from them because that's not an arena that I'll function well in. It's not something I'm comfortable with, and I feel violated by it because you're constantly belittling, you're constantly mocking, you're constantly, you're condescending to people. Sarcasm is very ugly, people. It's one thing when you do it sparingly as a joke and it's understood, but as a culture of communication, sarcasm is ugly. It's either arrogant or it is filled with low self-esteem. So, some people just set boundaries and say no sarcasm. Others set boundaries and say no profanity. That's not my level. And some people, they're Christians and that's their reason. Others are not Christians, they just don't like it. I remember having a teacher one time that said when you use profanity, it's because you lack vocabulary. Hey, so that's a boundary. That's an area of boundary that you can set. Physical boundaries. For instance, types of touch. You have somebody that says, don't you hit me, it's just off the table. Others are like, don't be aggressive and roughhousing with me. Don't do it, right? In other arenas, it's like, don't touch me sexually. This is inappropriate, right? So you can determine the boundary of touch. And of course, that would change from relationship to relationship. While sexual touch is not inappropriate for a married couple, sexual touch is inappropriate if you're my colleague. What in the world are you doing? You know what I'm saying? And so that area of physical boundaries, how are you touching me? What's acceptable touch? And then also space, physical space. When I go to other countries, we learn this in psychology or sociology. I think it's sociology here, the study of people and our social skills. But in sociology, we learn that different cultures have what's called a space bubble. When I took sociology, Americans had the largest space bubble in the world, which meant we naturally stand so far apart when we talk. And when our children get too close to people, we grab them and we pull them back because we inadvertently are training them that our space bubble is this big. Well, when you go to another country and somebody walks up to you and you're like, my nose is about ready to touch your nose. Why are you in my face like this? Well, it's very normal to them because the cultural space bubble is just much smaller. They're not trying to rob you. They're not trying to do anything crazy. You just have to know the culture that you're in. And so physical boundaries also have to do with space. It could be space like don't come in my bedroom without permission or don't go in my pocketbook without asking me. A lot of women don't play that stuff. Our pocketbooks are just like, I don't know. It's like Fort Knox. Don't go in my pocketbook, right? So whatever your space is, you have a right to set boundaries, as well as with property. Like I constantly say, don't take my stuff without asking me. You don't take it because you think I'm not using it. You don't eat my food because you think I wasn't going to eat it. That wasn't yours to make that decision. So you can set physical boundaries. There's also emotional boundaries. And that's the way things make you feel. And so you can set boundaries around your emotions, meaning some people don't mind being bullied or intimidated. They're just used to it. Maybe they were raised like that. Maybe they got in an abusive relationship and they just kind of think it's the new norm and they just, they live like this. A boss can be very intimidating to them. A friend can be a bully. I don't know how that's your friend, but a friend can be a bully. They can date someone who intimidates them, But then others are like, cotton picking, no. You're not going to make me feel emotionally scared when I'm around you. That's toxic. And my boundary is if my emotions are in turmoil around you, then around you is what's getting ready to change. I don't need to be around you. And so you can set boundaries around your emotions. I don't let people come around who drain me constantly. Like every time I see you. What's that thing on Charlie Brown? Is it Charlie Brown, one of them that's like depressing, You don't let people come and drain your joy and drain your peace. Every time you come, you are so toxic. I need to go plug in somewhere when I leave you. You can set boundaries on your emotions that you don't allow people to drain you like that, intimidate you, scare you. You can set boundaries. And of course, those boundaries should always run in two directions. The boundaries you set to protect and preserve you, you ought to automatically give that same boundary consideration with other people, because you should want to respect other people. You should want to give what you desire to receive, right? Okay, also there's spiritual boundaries. Your belief grid. What's your belief grid? You don't have to. I never understand when someone dates someone. You guys ever seen God's Not Dead? When that girl is dating that professor and he is like so condescending to her with all his little atheist friends, and he mocks God. And I'm thinking to myself, you dating this fool? No, you would not be disrespecting my creator, my savior, when you know this is who I am, and you're going to just violate my spiritual beliefs like that. Now, if I'm at a table with a bunch of agnostics and atheists and Buddhists and Hare Krishnas and Christians and Jehovah's Witnesses and Catholics, and we understand that it's a multiplicity at the table, then we're going to have an intelligent and a respectful conversation. But if you're in my close set of people and you're coming at me hard, I'm setting boundaries. I'm not marrying somebody who mocks at my God. I'm not having a close friend where it's a battle of my spiritual belief when I'm around you. So you can set boundaries with that. You can determine who can be in your inner circle and who can't. You can determine what happens in your inner circle and what doesn't. Okay. Also, there are financial boundaries. Like, what are your boundaries around spending habits? Do you just spend every dime you get? Does it burn a hole in your hand, as the old people used to say? Or do you set boundaries on your spending? Right. When I was growing up, my mom raised my sister and I with the 10-5-5 principle. 10% to God off the top of anything you get, be it a paycheck or a gift from somebody, 10%. 5% goes into your long-term saving, and 5% goes into your short-term saving. Well, after you do that, right, you pay your bills. We weren't old enough to pay bills then, but you do what you got to do with it. So in other words, the first 20% of our money goes to, our God and ourselves first. Then the other 80% live off of it. Do what you got to do. And if you don't have a dime when you finish, so what? Because I've already honored God in the way I wish to, and I've already preserved my savings. So you can set boundaries around your spending, around saving, around investing, and you can set boundaries with other people. Like, you're not going to spend my whole check, be it your child, adults. You hear that word? Adults. Your children don't get to tell you how to spend your money. Set boundaries. Yeah, it's good for you. You like that $150 tennis shoe? I'm willing to put half. You better come up with the other half, right? Or to say to someone that you're in a relationship with, I'm not comfortable being broke 3 days after I get paid. So you can set boundaries around that type of stuff. And you should set boundaries because you are worth it. And you can set boundaries around your psychological health. How you think in general. Are you a positive person, a pessimistic person? Are you a bigot in some way, right? What is your thinking like? And then what are the people around you, the conversations that are being had, the culture that's there? What's the psychological norm that you are allowing in your life? Set boundaries on it. There are so many types of people in the world. I guarantee you that there is somebody that thinks along the vein that you do that can be respectable, and you guys can operate within one another's boundaries and your thoughts on various topics. You don't want people, sometimes you go for the fight. The fight is fun. That's what we're here for. We're just going to the mat on this. But then other times, I just don't want to be in a fight. I just want to have a decent conversation with someone, a wholesome conversation, an opinionated conversation, and it's a safe thing to do. So you can set boundaries around that. Now, some of the benefits of boundaries is that you create this predictability that outweighs the impulsivity. You ever meet people where you like, not in a good way, like, we never know what to expect from you, not that, but you like, you don't know what you're going to get. That's not a good feeling in important issues. And so having boundaries is not like this moving target. Today is this, tomorrow is that. I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know what might set you off. I don't know what might make you happy. I don't know how to touch you today. You don't want that. Boundaries help to create a predictability, not a staleness, but a predictability so that the insanity of impulsivity. See, there's an impulsivity that's more like spontaneous. That's different. Impulsivity usually is like not controlled. It's a little bit out of control. And so boundaries help to provide that predictability. It also helps to provide stability. And when you have stability, what you get is you begin to eliminate vulnerability, that unsafe. You have people in your life, relationships in your life, where vulnerability is the connecting point. It's like, it's so trusting, it's so safe that I can even lay my vulnerability before you because you've proven, we've demonstrated the safeness of it. But at large, you don't want to just be vulnerable all the time, just out there. No, you don't. And so having boundaries creates a stability from that person according to their boundaries, from you according to your boundaries. And it helps to diminish some of that vulnerability. It also promotes security and eliminates or diminishes danger. Now, you know this is true when you talk about violence in relationships. If you have no boundaries, people can just cuss you out. They can hit you if they want. I'm appalled at the number of relationships that don't have consent. Follow me, grown-ups, that don't have consent. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And so setting boundaries creates a security that says, don't cross this line with me. And people in your circle either accept it or they get out of your circle. And so it eliminates that danger. And then also it creates a confidence for you. You shouldn't be fearful. I cannot imagine being a child and I'm scared to go talk to my parent to say, I want some water. Oh, what you gonna do, hit me with the water bottle? Well, some kids live in that environment. And just imagine some of them grow up and work and get in relationships where if I say, you know, I don't wanna watch this on TV, they take and bash you with the remote control. Are you crazy? You don't get to do that to people. And so when you create boundaries, it allows you to be confident that this person accepts me with the boundaries that come with me, and I accept them with the boundaries that come with them. And it's a safe place, you know, and so I don't have to live scared. I don't have to live wondering if it's dangerous. I don't have to live feeling vulnerable to them and stuff like that. I get to live in a healthy place. So those are some of the benefits of boundaries. What are some of the boundary barriers? Well, one is fear of rejection. A lot of people fear that. I never forget when I was a younger person, I was raised a younger adult, but I think I may have been a late teen. And God just let that word come off the page to me one day, that we are accepted in the beloved. And that was so precious because I think it was setting me up for my life. Like, you don't live to be accepted by Joe and Jane and Rick and Tina. No. You are accepted in the beloved Christ Jesus. And once you have that acceptance, everything else can roll with it. I would like for you to accept me if you bring something good to the table. But guess what? Some of the people rejecting you, you look up to heaven later and you say, thank you, God. That was baggage. That was some mess. Thank God they so-called rejected me because I needed them out of my life anyway. And so some people, their boundaries to setting barriers is they feel that if they stand up for themselves, they'll be rejected. Baby, you have to be the greater acceptor of yourself under God above anybody else. Just keep that in mind. I'm going to stop right there with that. Some people fear of abandonment. And abandonment goes on a little deeper than rejection, because sometimes with rejection, they stay around, but you feel that cold shoulder in the room. Where abandonment, some people may leave your life that you don't want to leave your life, may exclude you where you want to be included. And so they're fearful of that. The other is the fear of confrontation, because at some point in your life, and it's not like once in a lifetime, it happens constantly, you have to speak up and let your boundaries be known. Because it's inevitable that you will meet people on your job, in life, who will cross the boundary. And you have to say, unacceptable. That's not something that I allow in my life. That's not something I participate in, right? And some people are so afraid of confrontation that even if in their heart or their mind that's really a boundary, they won't express the boundary. And so they stay violated all the time simply because of fear of confrontation. Another is fear of retaliation. Some people, you just got some nuts in your life, right? And so you're so afraid that if you express a boundary that they'll retaliate. But you need to see that that's something wrong with their psyche. Who does that, right? And if you're doing that, you are wrong. People get to set boundaries. I love this reality. Everybody gets one life to live, and you don't get to live mine. And so if this is a boundary for me, respect my boundary, even if you don't want it to be a boundary for you. So you don't get to retaliate because I have a way I want to live my life. I'm not trying to live yours. I want to live my life, right? But I want to tell you this. Some people, their boundary is fear of violence. And if you know that you're dealing with a violent individual, don't go setting boundaries and getting socked in your eye. Get some help from someone professional. Get someone who you know can stand with you. Get some support for people who can have your back. Because some people are in some really, really, really dangerous situations. And so setting your boundaries could create violence. Now, that's not the norm. So 99.7% of us set those boundaries. But that other little percentage, we understand you're dealing with a unique situation, so don't do it on your own. Get some backing, maybe even get some professional advice, because as you know, I'm not a counselor, a therapist, a life coach. That's not me. I am a pastor, and I'm speaking in terms of that. And so if I knew you and knew you were in a violent situation, I would support you with that. And so I'm telling you, get professional support, get some backing before you make your boundaries known so that it doesn't have to become violent for you, all right? All right. Now, I want to share with you something that a woman named Anne Catherine, she wrote that book. She says, and these are her direct quotes, all right? This is not me. Healthy boundaries allow you to have high self-esteem and self-respect. They allow you to share personal information gradually in a mutually sharing and trusting relationship. It allows you to protect physical and emotional space from intrusion. If you don't have boundaries, baby, you're like an open door. They could just bulldoze in. You got to have boundaries. It allows you to have an equal partnership where responsibility and power are shared. You should not feel used and exhausted and empty because it's one-sided. It allows mutuality. It allows you to confidently and truthfully say yes or no. You will be amazed at the number of people who won't give an honest yes or an honest no. And it could be something as simple as they just are people pleasers. They fear rejection. If I say no and you say yes, or if I say yes and you say no. So it can be everything from something small to something scary, but healthy boundaries allow you to let your yes, the Bible said, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. And you have the right to do that. And it allows you to separate your needs, thoughts, and feelings and desires from others. Without healthy boundaries, people just merge into every little thing somebody else is feeling. No, I wasn't sad before you came in, and I'm not sad now. I wasn't mad about the situation before you got mad, and I'm not mad now. But if you don't set emotional boundaries, you can just be like an emotional chameleon. Whatever the group is feeling, that's what I'm feeling. Well, no. Really respect yourself enough to identify, what do I feel about it, right? It also allows you to make healthy choices and take responsibility for yourself, because the flip side is unhealthy boundaries are characterized by sharing too much too soon, not expressing your needs and wants, feeling responsible for others' happiness. Do you know you can't make anybody happy? You can dress up like a clown and walk around singing and dancing, and if someone is not happy, first of all, if they don't have a level of joy, your happenings will not make them happy, all right? It is characterized by the inability to say no because of fear that we just talked about. It is characterized by basing how you feel about yourself on how others treat you. Like, I thought I looked great before I walked out, but when they look me up and down now, I think I look a mess. Are you kidding me? you still look as good as you felt when you walked out the door before you met up with them. It's characterized by not taking responsibility for your own life. And again, that's like that chameleon. And it can be almost like a leech. You know, just tag on to somebody else's existence because you have no boundaries of your own. And it ultimately can be characterized by a feeling of powerlessness, right? And nobody should feel powerless. You shouldn't. And she says this, at first you will probably feel selfish, guilty, or embarrassed. Do it anyway. And if y'all were in church, I would say do it anyway. Do it anyway. And remind yourself you have a right to self-care. So just before I conclude, how do I create healthy boundaries? The first is identify the area that you want protected and know why within yourself you want that area protected. All right? You can't do it because I do it, because it really may not mean anything to you. You got to determine for yourself. And then once you identify that, then determine the action that will be taken if it's violated. Because to say I have a rule, but you never do anything about the rule, if somebody breaks it, you don't really have a rule. So to say you have a boundary and you don't have any thought in mind as to what you do if that boundary is violated, you don't really have a boundary. What you have is lip service. So in some cases, the action is, I'm going to talk to you because maybe you don't know that I have a boundary concerning that. Or maybe I'm going to withdraw from you because I realize you're toxic. You getting out my circle. Or whatever the case may be. So whatever action needs to follow if the boundary is violated, you need to determine that. And then make up in your mind not to send mixed signals. When you set a boundary and then you apologize for your boundary, you just nullified it. Void. People going to walk all over it like a broken down fence. So you cannot send mixed signals. That's why you have to determine the area and the why. And then know what you're going to do if it's violated. So if you have no boundaries, create some. You're worth respecting. And if you have boundaries, adhere to them. It promotes healthy relationship. People hear me. It promotes. It doesn't exclude. You don't want these harsh, rigid, alienating boundaries. You know, don't be ridiculous. You want to live. You want to live healthily. Your boundaries are only there to make sure that the relationships and interactions are healthy. So thank you for tuning in to Victorious Living. I hope you enjoyed that topic, and I hope that you go back and look at it again in the future, because personal boundaries are worth reviewing. Personal boundaries must be in place. And as you grow and as you change, personal boundaries will be enlarged. They may be fine-tuned, but you know, you got to have them because you're worth it. So thank you again for tuning in. Let's get together next Tuesday at 6 p.m. right here on Power of Purpose Radio. During the week, I ask that you would invite a friend to tune in. I pray that it would bless them and that they would live more victoriously in the areas that we discuss, and maybe some other areas too. They might go ahead of us, right? Visit the website throughout the week at www.inrememranceministries.com or .org, and you can look at your favorite Victorious Living program as many times as you like. You can invite others to look at a program that you think would be a blessing or an encouragement or uplift to them. And if you ever miss a show, which we hope you don't, but if you ever miss a show, you can always go right on there and look at the archive shows right there. Remember that this Thursday, this is the week, I said it last week, but this is the week, Thursday, May 4th, is our National Day of Prayer. So I hope you would join the Victorious Living team in praying for the safety of our nation, the wisdom of our leaders, for healthy families, and for positive individuals. We're going to pray on this Thursday, man. Hell's going to be rocked, and heaven will be rejoicing. Join us this week. 8 o'clock tonight, we have our Tuesday Teleprayer, and that number should be on your screen, or go to our website, www.inrememranceministries.com or .org, for the number and the code. Just dial in and believe, and we pray some powerful prayers. If you have a prayer request, send it in. We'll pray your prayer. And on 7 p.m. tomorrow, we have our adult Bible study, and we'll be launching a new topic. So if you're one of those people that like to be in from the beginning, come on out. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. The address is right on the website. And then Sunday, we would love to see you in the house at 10 a.m. where the Word of God is rich. Have a victorious week.